evening, we begin with breaking news. The U.S. Senate has acquitted former President Donald Trump on the impeachment charge of inciting last month's deadly siege at the Capitol and siding with the mob that attacked the heart of American democracy in his name. The verdict, 57-43, short of the two-thirds majority needed to convict. 7 Republicans sided with all Democrats and 2 independents to vote guilty.
Hey everyone, welcome. William is here. Here's what just happened, guys. In this imagined scene, the Senate gavel comes down 68-32, 10 Republicans, including Collins, Murkowski, and Hawley, crossing the aisle. The two-thirds threshold everyone called impossible cleared, and Trump declared unfit to serve effective immediately. In that single moment, the entire architecture of American political power rearranges itself. After everything that came before, after all the court battles and the tariff wars and the contempt warrants and the survivor testimony and the cabinet resignations, it all comes down to this one parliamentary action. One vote, one gavel strike, one constitutional mechanism that has never been used successfully in the history of the Republic, finally being activated in the most dramatic fashion imaginable.
Correspondent Chris Van Cleve followed it all, including some surprises, and joins us from Capitol Hill. Chris?
Adriana, the former president is claiming victory tonight, saying in a statement his impeachment was just another phase of the greatest witch hunt in our country's history. But this vote, while unsuccessful, was the most bipartisan vote to convict an impeached president in U.S. history.
So this just happened. Capitol Hill just turned into absolute chaos after a Senate vote scenario involving Trump exploded across political media like somebody threw gasoline directly onto the Constitution. And what makes this whole thing crazier is that people online are now imagining what America would actually look like if Republicans themselves finally turned on Trump publicly. Not Democrats, not MSNBC, his own party. Because once that idea entered the conversation, the internet immediately lost its mind.
What would be involved if the 25th Amendment were to be successfully invoked?
For this to actually happen, there would have to be a majority of those senior advisors, those cabinet officials, who go to the vice president and say, we collectively believe that the president should not remain in office. The vice president would have to agree to that. The president can object, and if he objects, then Congress has to weigh in, and a two-thirds majority in the House and the Senate would have to be on board with doing so.
Incoming Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer is calling for the immediate removal of President Trump from office. The president is accused of inciting violence and egging on his supporters who stormed the U.S. Capitol building yesterday. Now, Senator Schumer wants President Trump out of the White House, either by invoking the 25th Amendment or by Congress reconvening to impeach him again.
Crazy stuff. Honestly, this is the part that shook people the most. For years, everybody said the same thing over and over. Trump would never lose Republican support. Never. The base was too loyal. The senators were too scared. The political cost was too high. But then people started asking a different question. What happens when protecting Trump becomes more dangerous than removing him? Because that is when political survival instincts start kicking in hard.
Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois is joining the growing calls for the removal of President Trump. He posted this clip on Twitter just a short time ago.
Sadly, yesterday, it became evident that not only has the president abdicated his duty to protect the American people and the people's house, he invoked and inflamed passions that only gave fuel to the insurrection that we saw.
Pressure is what changes politics, not morality, not speeches. Crazy pressure. And according to this imagined scenario, the pressure became unbearable. Poll numbers collapsing, donors panicking, swing state Republicans realizing suburban voters were preparing to politically body slam anybody still defending Trump. And once fear starts spreading through Washington, loyalty suddenly gets real flexible.
Well, Mugo, a senior White House official tells me that he expressed to the conference that he is growing frustrated with all the holdouts, and he wants every single Republican to vote yes. Actually, you can take a listen to what he had to say when he was asked about this at the Capitol.
What's your message to the holdouts?
Well, it's not a question of holdouts. We have a tremendously unified party. I don't think we've ever had a party like this. There are some people that want a couple of things that maybe I don't like or that they're not going to get. But I think we're going to have tremendous, not luck, we have tremendous talent. This man has done an incredible job as Speaker.
Did you think you would ever see this? The gavel drops. The chamber goes silent. And suddenly the most powerful man in American politics is no longer protected by the office that kept him insulated for years. That is the psychological earthquake inside this entire scenario. Because once Trump becomes a private citizen again, everything changes instantly. The legal shields disappear. The investigations get teeth. The people around him start calculating differently. And Republicans immediately face the biggest identity crisis the party has seen in decades. And honestly, the reason this hypothetical exploded online is because deep down, people understand something terrifying about American politics now. The impossible does not feel impossible anymore. That is the real story. 5 years ago, people would have laughed at a headline like this. Today, people stare at it for 20 straight minutes on YouTube while eating tacos and doom scrolling at 2 in the morning like they are binge-watching the final season of a country slowly losing its damn mind. That is where America is mentally right now. Everything feels unstable. Every week feels like a season finale. Every press conference feels one bad sentence away from turning into a meme, a scandal, or a federal investigation. And whether people love Trump or hate Trump, everybody understands one thing very clearly. If a moment like this ever actually happened, it would instantly become one of the most chaotic political events in modern American history. Because this is bigger than one man, bigger than one presidency, bigger than one election. This is about what happens when pressure inside the system builds so violently that the machine finally starts turning on itself publicly. And honestly, you can already feel traces of that pressure everywhere. Look at the country right now. Cable news runs 24 hours a day like the building is permanently on fire. Social media reacts to every rumor like somebody just leaked the nuclear launch codes onto Reddit. Politicians speak in all caps now. Everybody is accusing everybody else of destroying democracy while simultaneously selling coffee mugs about it online for $34.99 plus shipping. It is complete political insanity. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos sits Donald Trump, still somehow dominating every conversation in American life at the exact same time. That is what makes these hypothetical stories spread so fast online. Trump is not treated like a normal politician anymore. He is treated like an event, a living political hurricane that everybody keeps staring at even while screaming they want the storm to stop. And because of that, every imagined scenario involving Trump instantly feels emotionally believable to millions of people, even if the constitutional mechanics behind it are complicated. That is the power of perception. Once enough Americans start feeling like the system is unstable, even the craziest political outcomes suddenly stop sounding impossible. That is why this hypothetical hit such a nerve online. Because people can actually picture it now. Senators panicking behind closed doors. Republican strategists sweating through emergency meetings. Staffers whispering in hallways like the White House suddenly turned into Succession with worse lighting. Everybody trying to figure out who stays loyal, who flips first, and who gets politically vaporized when the smoke clears. And the funny part is, Washington would probably still try to pretend everything was completely normal while the whole thing was unfolding. That is what Washington does best. Absolute chaos behind the curtain while everybody in front of the cameras acts like they are calmly discussing tax policy at a Rotary Club dinner. Meanwhile, the internet would already be moving at light speed. TikTok clips, Senate reaction compilations, body language experts suddenly becoming constitutional scholars overnight, YouTube thumbnails with giant red arrows pointing at senators blinking too hard during hearings. Somebody would already be selling 6832 t-shirts before the vote counting even finished. America processes political trauma like it is live sports now. That is the reality. And honestly, part of what makes this situation so psychologically explosive is the idea of Republicans themselves being the ones who finally pull the trigger politically. Because for years, the dominant narrative has been that Trump controls the Republican Party completely, that the base is too loyal, that elected Republicans are too terrified to move against him publicly. So the second people imagine a scenario where senators actually cross the aisle in huge numbers, the entire balance of political gravity shifts instantly. Suddenly, the question becomes terrifyingly simple. If Republicans themselves decided Trump was politically radioactive, what would that say about how bad things had become behind closed doors? That is why people get hooked by these stories. It is not just about Trump. It is about the image of the political machine breaking internally under pressure. And pressure is the key word here, because pressure changes everything in politics. Pressure is what makes loyal allies suddenly develop serious concerns. Pressure is what makes senators who spent years defending somebody suddenly start talking about constitutional duty on CNN. Pressure is what turns confident press secretaries into exhausted people blinking aggressively under fluorescent lights while reporters start circling like sharks that just heard blood hit the water. And if a moment like this ever truly happened, the psychological impact across the country would be unbelievable. Trump supporters would see betrayal. Trump critics would see accountability. Cable news would melt into a smoking crater of nonstop panels and breaking news banners for 14 straight days. Nobody would sleep. Half the country would think democracy had just been saved, while the other half would think democracy had just been hijacked in real time. And the markets, good luck. Wall Street reacts badly when Starbucks forgets pumpkin spice season. Imagine what happens when the presidency suddenly changes hands in the middle of a constitutional firestorm. Financial analysts would be on television trying to explain historic uncertainty while sounding like they personally needed a nap in blood pressure medication. Foreign governments would immediately start recalculating everything. Allies would panic, rivals would posture. The entire world would stare directly at Washington, trying to figure out whether America was stabilizing or speedrunning another level of political insanity. And through all of it, social media would keep doing what it always does, turning history into content in real time. That is the weirdest part about modern politics. Even the most serious moments instantly become entertainment ecosystems online. Memes, clips, reactions, podcasts, live streams, merchandise, hashtags. America no longer experiences political events quietly anymore. We consume them like binge-worthy chaos. And that is why this hypothetical hit people so hard psychologically. Because deep down, Americans are starting to realize something uncomfortable. The guardrails that once made certain outcomes feel impossible do not feel nearly as strong anymore. Everything feels louder, faster, more emotional, more unstable. And if there is one thing the Trump era has taught the country over and over again, it is that the sentence that could never happen has become one of the most dangerous predictions anybody can make in modern American politics.